You said that in the first meeting that day, he made clear, I think he used the words, that it was a bad decision. Did you feel you were being directed to change your decision?
Not at that point, no. I didn't think that was it. I thought there was a point of disagreement, but when I went back for the second meeting, it was a discussion about process rather than about the decision itself. And as I say, he deflected the point on whether he still thought it was a bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
You met with the Cabinet Secretary. The Cabinet Secretary indicated to you that, in his view, the board had taken a bad decision. You met later with the Cabinet Secretary, in which he expressed a number of concerns about the process and the way in which the decision had been reached. You then, quite quickly after that, having informed board members by email that you intended to do this, stopped the process which was underway of the return of the Chief Constable. The convener asked you earlier on, Mr Flanagan, whether you felt that the Cabinet Secretary was directing you to stop the process. Will you accept that if you look at that objectively, it's quite difficult not to conclude that you felt the Cabinet Secretary was telling you to stop this process?
I think direction is a more formal term, and I couldn't say that I had been directed to, but the position I was in, I felt I wasn't in a position to move forward with that decision.
So you felt you had no choice but to pause the decision?
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me follow on from that briefly, Mr Flanagan. What would have happened if you'd left the building that day and had not changed your mind?
Well, I would have, firstly, I would still have had to brief my colleagues on the board and gain their views on what we should do and so whether or not we should press ahead. I would also wanted to consult with the Chief Constable and see what his view was, because again, we need the parties to be comfortable and happy with the circumstances that are arising.
I mean, with regard to how the Cabinet Secretary felt about it, if you hadn't changed your mind.
Well, I think if we hadn't changed our mind as a board, and again, I would stress it's we, it's not me. If we had agreed that it was important, and some, from recollection, some members did raise the point as to whether or not we should press ahead, and therefore, I think we feel independent enough as individuals that if that was our considered position, then we would have continued with the process.
And you said that you felt that you couldn't have made any other course of action other than the recommended one. Otherwise, that you would have displeased the Cabinet Secretary, and that was not something that was acceptable. Is that sort of the fair characterisation of what happened?
No, I don't think it is. I don't think my role is to please or otherwise the Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to ask is do you felt you had any other course of action available to you other than what had been recommended and requested?
Because the issues were characterised in terms of process, then I had to make a judgment as to whether or not those process issues could be dealt with, and hopefully, as I said earlier, create a more conducive atmosphere to the return of the Chief Constable. As I assessed at the time, I thought those matters could be resolved relatively quickly, and therefore I decided that the best course of action was to pause and see if we could resolve those issues.
The reason I asked is that yesterday the Cabinet Secretary said that if you had not acquiesced to his request, that he would have felt compelled to invoke his powers under the statute to direct. It just strikes me that under that situation, you really would have felt that there was no other course of action. I just.
Well, if he invoked his powers, I mean, he is the Cabinet Secretary, and therefore he can override in that situation. I think that's a very big step. But you have to also recall, it's not from my point of view, I had already resigned. I was in the last 2 or 3 weeks of my departure. If I thought that was the right course of action, I would have felt obliged to do it. And therefore, if it was a case that it had to be a political decision, not for the return of the Chief Constable, then that would have been clear, and everybody should understand that. What I don't think is correct is that somehow that it's pushed back to the SPA in a situation where I don't think now it's clear what the basis of the Chief Constable's current absence is. That's not the risk of an interpretation or perspective or presumption that there has been some sort of political decision, but it's not overt, is not how it should happen. If the Cabinet Secretary wishes to make that direction, then he should make it.
If you could wind up, please.
I mean, I'm just really trying to. I would be interested in your opinion of what you really think the difference between a request and a direction is, whether or not that's a direction in the formal sense or otherwise.
As I said, he didn't request that. He said that he thought that there were steps that we should be taking before it should take place. So my judgment at that point was that we could do those things, and that therefore that was better than a situation that was more confrontational at that stage.
The request